This is Kyle, and this is part 2 of episode 1. This week we're going to talk about actions that you can take to overcome some of the challenges we discussed in part 1. Enjoy. So, let's spend some time talking about, this is an epiphany that I've been having over the last few months. And, I've been at this thing solo without the cubicle for 2.5 years now. You've been at it for longer than me. How long roughly would you say you've been detached?
It's going on about 4 years now.
Okay, so you've been at it longer than me, so I like to just throw out real world things that have worked versus a lot of theory. In fact,
right.
I'm not a big fan of theory. I know that theory has its place, understand that, but I'm a much more practical, show me how I can do this, that, or the other today than let me read 3 books for 3 years and then take action.
Exactly.
Please definitely chime in with as a matter of fact, what have you done? Let's just start with, Kevin. What have you done to sort of deal with family, for example?
I keep my family involved with what I do. I talk to them about it. I tell them I'm thinking about this, that, and the other. My father did several ventures. The background of my family as entrepreneurship is concerned with taxi cab drivers. And I noticed that within the family, they would have a particular name on the side of the cab that represented the company. But then I also noticed there were periods of times where their own names were on the taxi cabs. And so, my father showing me how different things were done, talking to me about, hey, I'm thinking about this. He was always thinking, always saying, thinking about doing this, thinking about doing that. But in his thinking about doing some of the things he knew not how to do, he was still always doing a lot of things that he knew how to do. From restaurants to taxi cabs to doing personal driving services to janitorial. He did several things. And so, you've got to have that inner circle support and talking to individuals. And then you know who you can talk to and who you can't talk to. And just like you said, if you're still on the socialite level of individuals, the conversations are going to differ. They're going to be talking about things that just come what one would consider maybe happenstance based on a budget, where in our eyes we're saying, okay, well, you know what, that's a major cost. So immediately, what's the return on that investment? And if I make this investment for one client and it doesn't cover the cost of, say, the piece of machinery, well then, okay, who do I look to continue to serve individuals that need this, or that market isn't here yet and I'm going to go on. So through conversation, you end up building a network of individuals that can get you through a lot of your things. And there's no disrespect to the spouse or your other half. It's that they may not be on the level you are as well, and so give that respect. And then just keep on moving forward with that. It's all about relationship.
Okay. I with my family, you have a huge advantage because you come from a family of entrepreneurs. So you were brought up around entrepreneurs, and people may hear, taxi cab drivers aren't entrepreneurs. I mean, if you really know what an entrepreneur is, you know that the taxi cab driver is an entrepreneur. I mean, A person who's doing something that they control, that they reap the maximum benefits from, is an entrepreneur. It could be shining shoes at the 7-Eleven, in front of the 7-Eleven down the street, but that business is that person's asset versus working for someone else. And I think that kind of gets lost a lot too, but I don't want to digress.
Right.
That environment is probably that, when you come from a family of entrepreneurs, it's probably the conversations would be probably a lot different than if you were the only entrepreneur in the household. But you did mention, is your wife an entrepreneur?
Yes, still teetering on it. She had a great business that she ran from her heart, and she was actually told that prior to opening up the business, and she told herself, "Okay, I'm not going to run it from the heart. I'm not going to run it from the heart." But my wife is a carer; she's a nurturer, and so she ran it from her heart. And when you run it from your heart, you're willing to do any and everything that you can. But depending upon the industry that you're in, it's critical to know if there are any governing agencies that may have, for instance, in the professional leagues, that may have a cap on you in some way. And in the professional athletic world, they call it a salary cap.
Okay, but still, and from the perspective of someone who's also gone down the road of being an entrepreneur, I still would imagine your conversations between the two of you are probably a little different than mine with my wife, who has never really, tried entrepreneurship. And that's not true. She has, but not to the extent of it being her sole source of income.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Our conversations are very diverse because of my passion just for, and the belief that everybody has a gift in them that can be developed into sustainability. I even with her, I do have to kind of power down at times. Though she enjoys it and she likes it, she's not like me. So I have to make sure that I'm lined up in respect to that. But where you're going with that is I agree. And that actually speaks to another topic of how do you work through that or work with that in a household where one is still fully employed, and this happens all the time. They like that corporate world or wherever they are, and the other one, I want to do this venture, and then the opportunity comes. I think that could be another whole
episode.
title, yeah, episode on
Another
itself,
topic of discussion.
or keeping families together.
No doubt about it. That could be an animal all in itself.
Right.
In my house, we think one of the most important things, and I've heard this from several entrepreneurs. This is not just me. You have to have the right partner, and you think that you want to do that anyway if you're going to be committed to somebody, whether it's marriage or boyfriend, girlfriend, live-in, whatever. If the commitment is there, you want to be with the right person, and that part is very critical. If you are considering, going down the path of entrepreneurship and you don't have the right partner, you're going to find out very quickly. And so how you deal with family is, I agree with you. The communications are key. In my household, we talk about everything. My wife knew, in my case, several years ago, 6-7 years ago, that I was going to make this happen. Didn't know how. You didn't have all of the pieces in place, although I thought I needed to at that time. But I knew it was going to happen. That part I was sure about. And so she has been there through, she's watched me try multiple things. She is already sort of, it's an easier sell for me now when I'm talking to her about something that I'm going to do, because we have kept the line of communications open. I didn't just plot this on the side and then, go out and do something that's critical to both of us, both of our lives, and then tell her about it afterwards. I mean, and then on the other hand, because the mindset is different when you're an entrepreneur or you're going down this road, family just isn't always going to get it. My mother, who I talk to very frequently, even though she's doing entrepreneurial things now in her retirement, but she's a baby boomer, so she's from the group that we talked about earlier, which is she went and she did the 40 years, and now she's doing her thing. So, that and fine, and that's fine. I'm happy to see her living for her for a change. Because I remember being raised and just watching the struggles and all of the things that go along with raising kids, and how you just are so restricted in what you can really do with your life. I think that also helped push me towards entrepreneurship myself. But, when I talk to her, it's easy to talk to her because she's doing those same things now. But I have people in my family I talk to, and friends especially, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They it's deer in the headlights, man. It's like, and even the ones that do get it, they are still plugged into the cube, or sometimes I call it the matrix. They're still plugged in, so they're giving me all the rebuttals that I used to give myself when I was, they kept me from making the leap, and it's really surreal. And some of them want to make the leap, but they're still getting in their own way, the same way that I was getting in my own way. And I don't really know if there is anything that you can tell the person. I think it's back to the man in the mirror conversation, dealing with self first.
It's funny, I often say or use the description or the story of, just jump off the cliff and grow your wings while you're on your way down. Individuals, when forced to grow their wings, they will, and they'll fly. They'll never hit rock bottom. I always use the Roadrunner cartoon where Y.E. Coyote hits the bottom, and all you see is this puff of dust. But in all actuality, individuals don't hit the ground. When they're forced to do it, they get so resourceful, and they say, "Man, why didn't I think of this beforehand?" Well, just like you said, within that cube, the cube is only so long and so wide, and so they're boxed in. And I had a conversation before earlier with someone a few weeks back, and when that term "boxed in" came to mind, I said, "Yeah, bring your box to my box, and we'll all get in a box jam." And if you want an example of that, cut the radio on first thing in the morning and listen to the traffic report. It's always a jam somewhere. You always hear horns blowing. They're trying to get here, trying to get there. Now, unfortunate for the individuals who may have been in an incident, that collision, accident, or what have you. However, that's where the back. But also, when you're in that queue, a backup is occurring there. Because nothing is really getting out. None of you is really getting poured into it. It's nothing unique that's there. It is what it is. That's the saying that we often use, and you don't see that until you're removed from it.
Chicken and the egg, right?
That's it.
I want to be a chicken, but maybe that's not such a good analogy, but you know what I mean. You have to catch 22, and maybe that's not such a good analogy either. But I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, and maybe I'll leave the analogies alone. But it's like this: you want to be there, and you're here. Thinking about getting there is not going to get you there. It'll keep you here.
Yes, it will.
You have to make sacrifice, and maybe that's what I was looking for. You have to make sacrifice, and you have to make a decision, because the devil's advocate is, well, I have a steady job. I mean, I got a steady paycheck, I got a car note, credit card debt, mortgage, dog, I got the whole thing. How am I ever going to be able to replace that if I become an entrepreneur? And I think that is one of the biggest obstacles that keeps the doers um, outside of the box and following the path of entrepreneurship, and the and everyone else in the bubble. Everyone else is still in the queue because they can't get over that initial hump. But there are other ways to take action and to jump off the cliff, as you say. And that's sort of that metaphor is kind of like, to me, if I was in the cube right now and I heard jump off the cliff, I would assume you meant quit my job. But I think the misconception is, and this is why it's so important to get your mind right first and start to get rid of all of those myths. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Stop believing every single thing that the machine is telling you to do.
Right.
And start using your own brain. Start thinking and start giving yourself credit for knowing the answer sometimes without getting confirmation from anybody else. That's critical because jumping off the cliff is not necessarily quitting your job. There's a million things you can do to start your journey that don't have anything to do with quitting the job. And we're talking about one of them right now. It's getting right with you, being honest with you first. One of the things that I would recommend that is very actionable is, do something that you don't do every day. Try that. If you have never listened to the internet is, I don't even know what word to use. If you're not online and being productive online, then, I really don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. I agree.
Everything you could possibly need is there. You just have to be able to find your way to it. And I hear a lot of people. Something that I hear a lot. It disturbs me to be quite honest with you. Is well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to look for. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to search. And I'm talking about the internet right now.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those people, they all know how to get on Facebook.
Yes, they do.
Every last one of them knows how to get on Facebook. They know how to get on Instagram. They know how to tweet. Well, some of them know how to tweet, but they know how to share photos, and they definitely know how to send messages back and forth on a smartphone. So, I always go back at that individual with, look, if you really want to learn how to do it, then you apply yourself the same way you do to being social and doing things that are entertaining to you. Start looking for resources online that talk about entrepreneurship. Start listening to uh, content like this recording that we're making right now. Start reading
Right.
books about entrepreneurship. Start there so that you can start to work on, thinking like those people do and not thinking like you're currently thinking. And that, I think, will lend itself to you very well. And, don't think about doing it and being out of the cube in a year or 6 months. Just start to learn how to get your mind thinking about things unlike you've ever thought about them before.
Yeah, a lot of good key points in that. One of my questions is, what happens when the cube grows for you? You're in the small cube, then all of a sudden the opportunity comes for a bigger cube. And so the bigger cube actually turns into an office that you no longer see it as being a cube, but in reality, it's still a cube. It's just bigger and it has a window in it.
So what do you mean? Like,
So
are we talking
what
about a promotion that's going to keep me from doing what I want to do and tie me to
there
where
you
I
go.
am?
Yeah, that uh not sideline. What is it when you get hit from the side? Blindside.
Blindsided, yeah.
When you're blindsided. So does that blindside you with a bigger cube that doesn't look like a cube, but in reality it still has four equal walls?
Well, if I was I'm still playing devil's advocate here, right? But I can tie this to a real life situation. that question brings me to a real life situation. When I went into management, and I did very well, by the way, because I was always trying to outwork I would always do two things whenever I got into a new job, and I changed jobs frequently throughout my career because I got bored very easily, and I always overachieved. First thing I do is I identify the top person in the organization, and the second thing I do is start working on outdoing them at everything. And that has always served me very well, and that's valuable as an entrepreneur as well. But
Right.
it brings me to a question that a situation that I found myself in. I don't know, when I was in the queue, someone asked me. Basically, the person I was working for got a promotion and they were leaving. And the team that I was on was small. It was only a 7 or 8 person team. Somebody approached me, and this is another one of those milestones of my life. Somebody from my team walked over to my desk and said, "Did you know you were getting that job?" And this completely blindsided me. I hadn't mentioned to anyone that I wanted a job, and to be honest with you, I wasn't interested in the job.
Right.
The thought had crossed my mind that, well, there's going to be somebody in that seat. And I did think about, well, what would it be like? But I didn't have those conversations with anybody. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And this person says, well, the word is that you're going to be tagged for that job. And I'm thinking, man, what are you talking about? But, beyond all of that, right? I never took the job. I never was asked if I wanted the job, and that may have been because of some things that transpired after that, some conversations that I had after that. But in my mind, for me personally, I was running the pros and cons as soon as I heard that. I wasn't discussing this stuff with anybody else. I was just thinking to myself, well, if I take that job, the conclusion I came to was if I take that job, I've watched the guy that I'm working for work that job for 2 years. I know what that job requires. I kept doing the math. I couldn't come up with a reason to give that much of myself to a company. I just couldn't come up with a reason. I just saw it as something that would cement me there more and make it more difficult for me to do what I wanted to do.
Well, you and herein you observe you had on your listening and observation lens, and that says that with time, am I willing to put this time in? Because we all get the same 24 every day. And so am I willing to do the time that this individual did based on what I've observed? And personally, I wasn't. I felt as though the job could be done if it took time because of the requirements of it and the position, fine. But unnecessarily, after the time had elapsed that they wanted me there was no need in me staying there any longer. I utilized technology. I brought it in. I asked for certain things, and I got it, and I used it. Also, I think because if when you start talking about time, say for the sake of numbers, you're making $100,000 on a job, and say we'll call it 40 hours for the sake of it, 40 hours a week. Now we might need to move it up to 50 for the sake of some individuals. Mindset don't think that they can make $100,000 in a 40-hour week, but anyway, whatever the hours are going to be required that you set in your mind, the minute you exceed that hour is the minute you start reducing your value. And I don't care what they're going to pay you. Whatever it is that they're paying you, once you exceed the 40 hours or 50 hours, you start decreasing your value as far as dollars are concerned.
That's interesting. I heard something the other day, and I think I can get this right because it's really fresh in my mind. With the idea is fresh in my mind as soon as you made that statement. Yeah, I think I heard it on a podcast that I was listening to at the time, and the person was saying how these MBAs, people who come out of these, excuse me, these top MBA programs, they're taught to hire you based on getting 3 times what you're worth out of you. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so in other words, when you hire when these executive HR folks are planning, what they're going to do and how they're going to operate their portions of the company, they're looking to get three times whatever it is that they're going to pay you. They're looking to get three times that in return.
Yep.
That's the ROI that is expected. I may pay you 100,000 a year, but I'm going to make 300,000 a year.
Exactly.
So again, another example of getting your mind right. Look at the bigger picture. You're not really all that special. I mean, let's be honest about this. We are not
Exactly.
that special when you're talking about a corporation. Okay, a corporation doesn't have friends. A corporation doesn't have families. A corporation only has shareholders that they're beholden to, and that's where the relationship ends. I can't remember the last time I heard someone mention the word loyalty. And to tell you one thing, they weren't in my age group if they did, because that's a thing of the past. That's really a 20th century thought or theory. Now I call it a theory because I've never seen it before. I know people who've experienced it, but I've never lived it or experienced it. I've had good jobs, but I've never worked for some place where I really, truly ever felt like I had real security.
No, in my corporate tenure, um, in the back of my mind, I was always preparing for that day. And for me, that day was going to be scheduled to be retirement. However, um, I wasn't surprised when I got an early opportunity to go and explore. And I was more than fine with it. Embraced it as a gift, still do, because some individuals aren't going to move until they're shoved. And I had a plan, and I was putting it into place. Um, but the opportunity came to where I got a chance to start. I got a chance to start my training camp early, which was good, and it was key for me. All the things that I did prior to one of the things, back to the very first thing that you said, how or what do you tell someone as it relates to this topic we're talking about, time. One of the things one suggestions I often give is when you really get serious about this thing called entrepreneurship, when you take off, make sure, if you can, and we all have personal things that we take off for, take off to go to a conference, to a workshop, take off to educate yourself on your industry, your business. Take a half a day for that. Like you said, when you say jump off the cliff, it's not literally going up and say, okay, today I quit. It's a mindset change that says, well, you know what? I'm going to jump off the cliff. Instead of the hour lunch that I take and go and, you know, eat the wrong foods, eat more than I should eat, and, at the wrong place and all that, um, I'm going to bring my lunch and I'm going to hit the local library or get somewhere, and if you got the flexibility, I'm going to run to a workshop at lunchtime. If I can, if it's not a set lunchtime, I'm going to do things that are going to start, propelling me forward.
Yes, that is what I was looking to hear. I mean, those are excellent examples. They're all actionable because when I was in the cube, and I'm sure as you were, well, when I took lunch, and that's a whole nother story.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
because I had been convinced that, or convinced myself rather, that lunch was not really important, that work was more important. And
Eggs.
man,
Yep, yep,
I
yep.
tell you, I can't even, I can't put into words how that's making me feel right now. But that is what my mindset was at the time. But you're right. When you do have looking for opportunities to be what I want to be instead of what the company wants me to be, the company
Exactly.
that you're working for wants you to be. And that is, like you just said, you're going to lunch anyway. Learn something while you're at lunch. Go to a meeting. You're going to take days off. You're going to take vacation where you may sit at home and just relax because, quite frankly, you're mentally and physically drained
Yep.
from this routine of this 9 to 5. I did the days, and I know it is not a 9 to 5.
That's right. That's right.
Do those things, and I think was one of the big things here that you can do that's actionable is, and it may not be that easy at first, But start having conversations with people who also think like you.
That's right.
Don't expect to lean over to your coworker and expect them to understand what you're talking about when you start talking about when you start saying, I'm going to jump off the cliff, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to start my own business. Don't expect them to understand what you mean by that, or what you're saying. I had another really interesting story on that same topic. When I was in the cube, I found that I was always trying to have those kinds of conversations, okay, with coworkers,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an uphill battle.
Yes, it is.
It was an uphill battle that I continued to try to have because I, quite frankly, thought some of them just were holding out on me. They just didn't want to tell me what they were already doing. Because in my mind, hey, everybody's got to be trying to do something outside of working this job. Everybody's got to have something that they want to do outside of this job, which I know now is not the case.
No, it's not.
But another thing is that a lot of folks who do not think that way, they are not really interested in having those conversations. They don't want you to pull the blinders off because they're afraid they'll go blind if you pull the blinders off. They don't want anything that's going to obstruct them, from following that yellow line. Your one of your sayings that you always mention. They don't want anything to keep them from following that yellow line down the hall versus
Right.
painting their own. If I got that right,
You got it. That's it.
they don't. You're a distraction when you are talking about starting your own business or leaving. You're a
Yeah, of course.
and you hurt and you are hurting. You're pointing the finger back at them and saying that they are somehow not good enough. Like what you have already, if it's not good enough for you, you must not be because you want to do something else. Well, it's not good enough. What are you saying about me? You're saying I'm settling for less. Is that what you're saying about me? And I had somebody literally tell me those words back when I was a craft person before management. So it's not a management, I like to point that out too, is I saw a lot of the same things in the blue collar side of the house as I did on the white collar side of the house.
Yep.
Same personalities,
Mm-hmm.
titles are different, roles are different. So I saw the same mentalities. I saw people who did good jobs on both sides, and I saw people who didn't do their job and didn't deserve to be there on both sides, in my opinion. But someone told me once, literally those very words, like, why would you want to leave here?
That's right.
What are you saying about me? And I'm like, I'm not saying anything. I'm not even having a conversation about you. I'm talking about me and what I want to do. So it's really a psychological hurdle just to get your mind right, just to start to jump off that cliff, to start thinking about tomorrow in a way that you've never thought about it before. Take some of that Netflix time and read a book or read a podcast. Go online, find yourself some groups of like-minded people. They are all around you, even where we live.
Oh
Even
my God. Yeah.
they're there. I mean, that's how you and I met. So
That's right.
we're
That's right.
living proof that you can hook up with people who have common interests and like minds. Our
Well,
region is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. One of the things I was going to say is one of the things as I was telling you in our conversation prior to this is going a different route. And telling you one of the locations that I go to weekly, I take a different route there. And people aren't comfortable with getting outside their comfort zone. So reading a book or going here, I actually did that a couple of weeks ago. I invited someone who's teetering on some different ideas. I said, hey, I'm getting ready to head to the local coffee shop. I'm gonna sit back and do some reading, let some ideas flow. You want to go? Well, I'm not too sure. And so it was kind of funny to me. But that is what it is, and that's fine. I put the invitation out there. The fact that they didn't want to take it, that's fine. Hopefully, it'll be something that they can move back on later in life and say, you know what? I remember when I got this phone call to go to a location other than where I'm at to do some thinking and let the environment speak, you know, maybe they'll jump on it then. But as far as taking a different route, individuals, they go to work one way and they come home, you know, whatever way that they come home. It's not about the scenic route. And the scenic route can do so much for you because you can see some things that you wouldn't necessarily see.
Yeah, that's funny. That reminds me of the situation where I have also a friend. This is why having conversations with one another is critical. Two minds are always going to be better than one. Um, I also have a friend that I've been working with that I used to work with in the cube, and he's still there, and he wants to take those steps, and you know, once another reason why it comes back to you and one on one and getting right with you and being honest with you because he wants to do it. His common law wife and I all sat down over coffee and we were talking about it. And I'm telling him, he was really just he took it was like getting in a time machine because he was harping on these things that I've long gotten over,
Mm-hmm.
that I used to obsess over, that I've long gotten over. We're talking about him and his future, and I'm doing my best to help where I can. And he's dwelling on and on about this one particular manager that doesn't like him. And I'm telling him, I'm saying, the world is a whole lot bigger than that person that you're talking about.
Right.
It's a lot bigger than that organization you work for. It's a lot bigger than the company that you work for. I said, and when you start looking at the world that way, this year, next time, you won't even remember that person's name that you're spending all of your time telling me about right now. Well, both of our time, really, but, I was there to listen to him. So, whatever he said was fine. But, you know, getting your mind right is about recognizing those kinds of things, and he, I made an offer to him to make those meetings a regular thing, and he apparently wasn't ready for it, and that's fine because we haven't had him again. It doesn't make him any less of a person. It just points out that your experience is similar, and it just goes to show that there's a trend, right? There's that trend of people not being able to get out of their own way to do what they want to do for themselves.
And that's it. um, there's so many different sayings. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I mean, they just go on and on. And again, for me, it's about the invitation to individuals. I'm going to continue on my path. I'm going to continue to build those relationships that I feel are key and that I know are instrumental in me moving forward. I'll continue to plant seeds for other individuals because in planting those seeds, I then actually create a harvest time for myself. That other individual, well, their harvest time might be a year, 2 years, 20 years later. That's fine. That's on them because there's nothing worse than having a harvest time coming. You don't know what to do with the crop.
I was listening to something today. It was a podcast I was listening to earlier today, and the topic of similar topic to what we're talking about. Which I thought was an eerie coincidence because we planned this a week ago. I have no idea when they planned theirs, but um, but so the point is the topic steered towards you know the mentality. A lot of the discussion was similar to ours. The 9 to 5 mentality. Um, but one of the things that really came out of that for me was, it was confirmation on what I'm learning, and to some degree have learned, which is you have to find yourself in like circles of like people. You got to find them, and you got to keep yourself there. I can't tell you all the different ways to do it. I could talk about we have already talked about some of the ways we've done it, but that's critical. It's critical because it will help you with that loneliness because it will put you in uh, circles with other people who are challenging the world the way you're challenging the world with entrepreneurship. And that is, you got to have that on this journey. That support system, you have to have it. You need to start challenging the way you're living now. And this is for anybody who's still in the queue, working a 9 to 5, or hell, even if you're in college and you've been told that this is, you have to go here or you won't be successful. You won't amount to anything. All of that is that one mindset. And that's what really I think is important here to understand. That's one mindset, and it's not the only mindset. There was a list. Forbes put a list out a couple of months ago about the 100 top successful people in the world, and on their standards, based on their standards, and they pulled out a segment that never went to school. That happened to be the largest segment in the group. They pulled out the segment that did have the higher education. They pulled out the segment that had inheritance. And, I just thought it was very interesting that there were so many people in there that just wanted to do it and did it. They didn't go to school. They didn't take classes. They didn't do a lot of the things that people, and I'm not beating up on school here, but I'm just making the point that school wasn't the only thing that was on the list. They didn't do all of the things that they had always been told that they had to do. They didn't follow the rules that had been laid out for them. And they all became successful because they put themselves on the path and worked hard, and they got to where they wanted to be.
Yeah, and that's that passion, that's that drive that supersedes. We've had discussions before as it relates to individuals being in environments that aren't any good to them, and just sitting there day in and day out, and that's not really what there. I believe there's your past is significant for your future, but when you can start identifying things and you can start lining up. There was one particular individual who decided to leave the world of management and go back to being in the world of being an associate non-management because it lined up with what they wanted to do when they retired. And they were in management for years. And people are like, oh, you're crazy, what are you doing? Well, they ended up making a very lucrative career when they retired based on the latest how-tos. And got some pretty decent contracts. And last I saw that individual, they were okay. Doing very nicely. And not saying that's not the route that you have to take, but for that individual, that mindset change was like, you know what? I'm up here. I'm on this level. I want to get back into the grind of things because when I transition out, I got some stuff I want to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It sounds like they went from management into, and I've heard similar stories, not completely the same as the one you're telling, but from the perspective of you climbed the ladder, went from associate to management, and then got to management, saw that the Wizard of Oz wasn't real, and then either left the company or went back to being an associate for whatever reason.
Right.
A lot of the stories that I've heard were, well, I was making more money as an associate and quite frankly, not being held, not as much was expected of me. And
yes.
I think a lot of that has to do with not only people just figuring out who they really are and what they really want, it also has, some of it has to do with the way companies are structured that have unions, which is a topic for another entirely different discussion. But what we want to focus on here is just that how the mindsets changed for these people who went from being an associate and went to being management and then went back. And, I don't know if, for me personally, a big part of it was when I went from being an associate to being management, there wasn't anywhere else for me to go but out the door into being my own boss, because I had seen what the future was going to be. Back to that job, potential job that I could have had. Won't really know whether I was going to get it or not, but I had seen where my future, what my future looked like, was going to look like had I stayed on that ladder. And I think that helped really, that helped me in my mind put things into perspective and decide this is what I really need to do. Staying here isn't going to get me fulfillment. It isn't going to get me what I really want. I may make the money. I'll be paying a bunch of taxes, and I'll also be working extremely long hours and not feeling fulfillment as a result of that. And I just wasn't willing to do that. So, yeah, that's just a really good point on example of mindset change.
Right, right. And that reflects back to earlier discussion on time and things like that will, this segment. And to be clear, when we talk about associate management, non-management, we're talking specifically in the world of telecommunications.
Right, right. Although I do think there's similarities, right?
Oh, no question, no question.
In any corporation, but I think after you get past corporation and you get to mom and pop businesses, some of the terminology won't really make sense. But then again, we can only focus or talk about what our experiences were, and not necessarily what someone else's experience is. But I always like to say you have to read between the lines sometimes.
Yes, you do. And I believe this is cross industry. But I just wanted to, make clarification of, for us specifically, for anyone, for those who are listening.
Okay. Well, I think, Kevin, this has been great, valuable for me, and hopefully for anyone that's listening. And hopefully there'll be more of these to come.
Well, I'm in it to win it. I think this was great. I learned a lot about Skype and recording, and I'm gonna look into this editing thing. This is really kind of slick. So I'm liking this a lot. Got my technology center set up here. I got some ideas in my head, for real.
Well, the sky's the limit. That's one of the things that I've always loved about technology is it turns every individual into a factory, in a sense.
It does, a manufacturer. And you know what? That's a good topic to talk about. What are we manufacturing?
Which is I agree. That's a good segue. Which raises a question before we close this out. Anyone who is listening who this information resonates with, who has had this similar experience, who is going through a similar experience right now, leave your comments in the comment section of this page. And if this recording should wind up somewhere where there aren't any comments, you can reach me personally through my site, my blog at kylembrown.com. And I don't know if you want to leave anything on that, Kevin.
Sure. I could be reached as well through my blog at fsjenterprises.wordpress.com.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. And until next time.
Joy.